Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's gone 4 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Welcome to this meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee here at County Hall on Tuesday, the 1st of August. As per normal, I'll just run through the procedure that we go through at a planning meeting. As the chair, I introduce the application, ask you if you've seen our site visit videos. Then our planning officer gives us any updates, any changes to the recommendation, and presents his or her report. We then have public speaking, 3 slots, 5 minutes for objectors, 5 minutes for an elected member, parish councillor, town councillor, and 5 minutes for a supporter. We then have questions. Members of the committee are then able to ask planning officers any questions they have about the case, and then we debate the issue. We ask for a proposal, ask it to be seconded, and then debate and hold a vote on it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for absence. Have we had any apologies for absence today?
Yes, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillors Foster, Renner Thompson, Robinson and Watson.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting held here at County Hall on Tuesday, the 4th of July, have been circulated. Are members happy that these are a true record of the meeting? Thank you. Disclosures of members' interests. Any members have any interest in the application before us today? No? Thank you very much. We only have one item of business this afternoon, item number 6, which you will find on page 11. And this relates to the demolition of the former Bedlington station building to the south to accommodate works to construct the new railway station, which has already been approved. And this is at Bedlington Railway Station, Station Street, Bedlington in Northumberland. I'm now going to ask our consultant planner, Mr. Gordon Halliday, to take us through this application. Gordon, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. My slide control isn't working for some reason. Sorry? Oh, right, sorry. Right, there it is. Thank you, Chairman. A couple of years ago, you approved the construction of Bedlington Station. Since then, works have started and have been progressing. And today's application relates to a sort of problem that's been encountered. Wasn't foreseen before the works were granted permission. It's come to light during the construction phase. You're all aware of that. 6 stations, including the one at Bedlington. So that's the application site. It's at the southern end of the proposed station, basically adjacent to the level crossing. So the main elements of the proposal, there's a couple of main buildings on Bedlington Station. I've got some photographs and illustrative stuff later on. This is for the demolition of the southern building. The sort of northern building, which is a larger building, would be retained. This south building was added in the first decade of the 19th century. The north building and the 2 signal boxes, which are referred to in the report, all date from the 1950s, from the inception of the railway, the sort of reopening, sorry, the sort of original opening of the railway. So it's about 60 years younger than the other buildings at Bedlington Station. The problem that they've encountered on site is that if retained, the building would need to be underpinned at considerable expense to enable the existing platform to be demolished and the new platform installed. What we'll see by the photographs is that this building sort of juts out more than the other station building, and it juts out beyond the place where the old platform needs to be demolished. Both station buildings have fallen into disrepair. Both need substantial expenditure to bring them back to sort of usable standard. Demolition opens up the area near the entrance to enable enhanced accessibility and public realm features to sort of be provided. So what I'll be referring to are the sort of advantages and disadvantages of the proposal. And the reason for that is that the sort of building isn't listed, but it is what's called a non-designated heritage asset. And national and local planning policy, national policy through the NPPF, local policy through your own local plan, require what's called a balanced judgment to be made on whether demolition should be allowed. So policy recognises that non-designated heritage assets should be retained, if possible, but they do allow for demolition following the carrying out of this balanced judgment and the assessment. We've received responses both for and against demolition as stated in the report, and obviously you've got some public speakers here later on today. That's the building that's proposed for demolition, and that's a view from the station platform. Brick built, slate roof, and various openings, some of which have been bricked over. That's the view from the street. It used to be the sort of old ticket office. We sort of think that it's likely that sort of people used to collect tickets from one of these windows that are there. That's the two buildings. So the south building on the left is proposed for demolition. The other building is proposed for retention. The sort of other building is larger and is sited adjacent to the street as opposed to being at right angles to the street. Another view basically from the level crossing, showing that the sort of north building for retention on the left and the south building that's proposed for demolition on the right. Inside this building, there's substantial disrepair internally. I mean, it has been used. I mean, basically, neither building has been used really in productive use since Beeching, since the closure of the railway in the 1960s. But sort of both buildings have been used by Network Rail for storage and the south building has continued to sort of be used for storage recently, storage of equipment that's sort of used in connection with the level crossing, for example. But as you can see, substantial damage. That's one of the small rooms. You sort of saw the windows facing onto the street. That's sort of one of these small rooms, and that's the other one. Signs that it's been used as an office. The other one might have been used as a toilet or some other such use. I've also got some visualizations. I mean, I've always tried to sort of show you visualizations because I think, although they're not part of the formal submissions, I think they are helpful in illustrating what the proposal would actually look like. In this case, I would stress they're for illustrative purposes only. They aren't to scale, and they're draft proposals. These are visualizations that the project team used for recent discussions with the parish council. So the sort of first one is a draft layout. This basically accords to the planning consent that sort of you have granted. The south building is retained. The north building is retained, and that's the sort of layout of features that sort of would be carried through on the approval that you gave a couple of years ago. Another view of that from the street, the sort of main access into the station would be between these two buildings, up onto the platform. This is a draft layout for the scheme with that building demolished. It sort of opens up the southern part of the station, allows a sort of improved pedestrian access to be provided from the street adjacent to the railway line and the level crossing, and it enables additional landscaping, public realm features to sort of be provided. And that's a sort of another view of that. What I didn't give you earlier is a sort of update. There's only one thing really to sort of update the papers in your report, and that was late last night there was a representation objecting to the demolition from the Victorian Society, and the Victorian Society has raised similar points that have been covered in the report in relation to other objectives, basically stressing or recognising that it is a non-designated heritage asset, recognising that a balanced judgment does have to be made, but in the Victorian Society's view, demolition should sort of not be allowed because of the heritage significance of the building. That's everything I've got to say, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we now come to the public speaking slot. And our first speaker this afternoon, who has 5 minutes, is Adam Hogg. Adam, you have 5 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members. West Bedwortham Town Council object to this planning application, which states the southern building at Bedwortham Station should be demolished, and support East Bedwortham Parish Council, planning objectors and those who signed the petition to keep this building. The building in question plays a major part in the whole of the Bedwortham area's history, having been built in the early 1900s and surviving the beater train cuts of the 1960s, which closed the route to passengers, and being the only group of original station buildings left on the whole Blythe and Tyne network that will be open to the public. Over the years, the whole of Bedwortham has seen less and less support for heritage, with a number of local historical buildings being demolished in recent years via the planning process, even though the local community has strongly objected to them being demolished. East Bedwortham Parish Council has submitted an interest in these buildings over a number of years to be used for the community, most recently highlighting the point in the Borderlands Place programme, with a lot of work and planning being undertaken to submit a bid for turning both buildings into a community hub and heritage centre with Borderlands support. East Bedworthing Parish Council have a proven track record for undertaking major works to bring derelict buildings and land into community use, as seen with East Bedworthing Community Centre and other local projects. The original application for this site highlighted both buildings would stay, and a recent NCC design shows the building could stay with works undertaken round it. The other designs show the platform would not reach where the building stood and a grass bank replacing the platform edge. Although East Bedworthing is not covered by the West Bedworthing Neighbourhood Plan, local residents in the West Bedworthing area have highlighted the importance of historical/heritage assets within the area during the neighbourhood planning process. As a consequence, we feel we must object to the demolition of any other station buildings and support calls for both buildings to be able to be repaired and used by the local community and commuters in future. We would ask the committee to support East Bedworthing Parish Council and refuse this application to allow both buildings to be brought back into use for future generations to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, our second speaker this afternoon is Keith Grimes, Chair of East Bedlington Parish Council. Mr. Grimes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair and members, and thank you for allowing me to speak. The Parish Council voted unanimously to object to this proposal. In addition, a Parish Assembly on the 25th of April, comprising local electors, voted with one abstention and no objections to object to the proposal. A petition raised by Northumberland Line Community Heritage Group gathered over 1,000 signatures over 2 weekends. Bedlington has a proud 200-year history of railway innovation that has echoed around the world. We want to preserve that heritage. If I may quote from the Heritage Assessment Addendum in your papers, the significance of Bedlington Station lies in its architectural and historic interest as one of only 5 former stations on the Blythe and Tyne line that has standing buildings. Their location is considered to give them landmark quality, and their architectural styling is also readily understandable as railway architecture, providing the buildings with architectural and aesthetic value. In the same report, the 2 buildings form a pair, with each contributing to the setting of the other. These are 2 of the oldest, if not the oldest, buildings in the parish, predating even the construction of St John's Church. The Parish Council have for many years attempted to engage with Network Rail with a view to developing, with grant funding, these buildings as a heritage and innovation centre to provide a community asset that celebrates the important railway heritage of our town. Network Rail have ignored our attempts at dialogue. Meanwhile, the buildings have continued to degenerate due to lack of maintenance. In 2020, the Parish Council were invited by Northumberland County Council to submit an expression of interest in both these buildings. A detailed proposal was forwarded. The vision was a development that forms the centrepiece of town redevelopment, provides first-class facilities that might be expected in more high-profile stations, creates a heritage and innovation centre, recognise the achievements of our forebears, restores civic pride, and creates job and business opportunities. The development would provide office space, exhibition space, waiting room and toilet, a cafe, and an atrium connecting the 2 buildings that would allow for pop-up local shops, tourist information, and other local services. East Bedlington Parish Council have earmarked $40,000 3 years ago to meet its contribution to the scheme and fund grant applications. We are confident, based on our track record, that grant funding will be available. After submission of this scheme 3 years ago, we had no response from NCC, apart from an email acknowledging receipt. Furthermore, in March of this year, the same proposal was accepted by the Bedlington Innovation Team as one of the proposals to go forward for Borderlands funding as part of the Bedlington Place Plan. This was as a result of almost 18 months of discussion with local councillors and officers from the NCC Regeneration Team. Should the demolition of the south building be allowed, this development, of course, cannot happen. The original planning application for the station clearly shows both buildings as retained on the platform, and we would really like to understand what has changed since then. We believe that the following are the material planning considerations. The proposed demolition will result in a characterless station, not discernibly different from any other. The character of these buildings, unique and original to the historic Blythe Town Line, will be lost forever. Restoration and repurposing of the buildings will contribute greatly to the restoration of civic pride and give the town a centrepiece to be proud of. Development of the buildings, as noted above, would create employment, both paid and voluntary, and attract footfall to the town. It will become a destination rather than just another stop on the line. As noted above, plan proposal reference 21-01106, which was the planning document for the station, shows both buildings clearly on the platform. It was on this basis that our parish supported the planning proposal. We would urge NCC, Network Rail and Northern Rail to work with the community to find a way of retaining and repurposing both station buildings rather than taking the cheapest and simplest option of demolition. Thank you.
Gentlemen of the committee, I'd like to ask Alana Healy, for her contribution this afternoon. She's speaking in support of the application. Thank you, Alana. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and members. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak here today. Members will recall that they approved the planning application to construct a new railway station at Bedlington in November 2021. Since the granting of planning permission for the station, further work has been undertaken to review the constructability of the approved station scheme. This has resulted in the application before you. The submitted application provides a reasoned justification for the proposed demolition and includes consideration of the structural integrity of the existing building, the cost of any restoration, the commercial viability of reuse and accessibility requirements associated with the station. During the determination of the application, a public engagement exercise has been undertaken to illustrate the public realm improvements which will result from the removal of this building. If the application is approved, engagement will continue to ensure that the landscaping scheme responds to the needs of the local area. Furthermore, discussions regarding the reuse of the northern building continue to advance. This is evidenced by Network Rail's recent offer of a 99-year lease, as referenced in the officer's report before you. The proposed demolition is associated with the long-awaited reopening of the Ashington Blythe Tyne line, which will re-establish Bedlington's relationship on the historic railway line. However, if the proposed station was implemented in accordance with the previously approved plans, the presence of the dilapidated south building would detract from the appearance of the new station and forego opportunities to improve accessibility and the public realm. It is recognised that the south building at Bedlington is a non-designated heritage asset. However, national and local planning policy requires a balanced judgment to be reached when considering the loss of such an asset. The applicant acknowledges the group value of the buildings and associated historic railway infrastructure. However, this application provides the opportunity for comprehensive placemaking by improving accessibility and public realm associated with the station, as well as complementing any future use of the Bedlington North building. It will encourage use of railway services by residents and create a more pleasant arrival gateway for residents and cyclists. The application before you has been thoroughly assessed by planning and other officers and is found to be in accordance with the relevant planning policies. In particular, it has been concluded that the balanced judgment and overall planning balance weighs in favour of granting permission, subject to appropriate planning conditions. I therefore respectfully urge members to accept the officer's recommendation to approve the application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you very much. Members of the committee, have you any questions you wish to put to our planning officers? Barry Flux.
Thank you, Chair. The landscaping outside, are there any conditions we can put on to ensure that if it is approved today, that landscape works like cutting the grass will happen at a regular enough basis? And the reason I ask this is I represent Cramlington, and if you go at the wrong time of year when Network Rail haven't cut the grass, it looks a proper mess, frankly. So I'm just wondering, is there any condition we can put on this to make sure that they would cut the grass enough times, keep it tidy, if it was approved?
Well, there is a landscaping condition proposed as part of this, condition number 5, which requires a landscaping scheme to sort of be submitted. I mean, it requires that scheme to sort of be retained for the lifetime of the site. It doesn't specifically mention the frequency of grass cutting, but I dare say that's something that we could discuss with the applicant as part of the submission of that scheme.
Okay, that answers my question, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ian Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask you to turn to page 16, please, Gordon? Just for clarity, this is. 5.5, third sentence down. It's considered that the southern building lacks architectural character of the southern building. I presume that's a total misprint.
Sorry, it's considered that the southern building lacks the architectural character of the northern building.
Thank you.
So this is a submission received by the Railway Heritage Trust, which is a national organisation that has experience across the country in the sort of renovation of buildings associated with sort of railways, and as is said there, their view is that it's a northern building that has the greater architectural merit, but also has the greater potential. It's a larger building inside, and it has a greater potential for the sorts of beneficial uses that the community are seeking. So we're thinking about things like cafe or museum or small retail outlet, these sorts of things. So certainly in the view of the Heritage Trust, it's the northern building for sort of both reasons, both in terms of its architectural merit and its potential for beneficial after uses that the Heritage Trust is keen to see retained, and there is no proposals. And as Ms Healy said, Network Rail have agreed to give a 99-year lease to the parish council for that northern building at a maximum rent of £1 per year. So that is something that has moved on a little bit from when you considered the station application. What's not really moved on is how these sort of after uses might be funded. I heard the sort of parish council representative saying that they've sort of allocated £40,000 for that. If you look at the report, what the report is saying is that it's going to cost between £775,000 and £875,000 to bring both buildings back into beneficial use. And that's on top of the costs of underpinning the north building underpinning the south building if the south building is retained. Now these are sums that that sort of aren't available at the moment. I mean, I take the point that the parish council is making in that if you do have some funding available, you can use that in order to seek grant aid. I just make the point that sort of 40,000 is a very small amount of the funding that would be necessary if both buildings were retained. Obviously, if only one building was retained, the funding requirement to bring that back into beneficial use is going to be less than that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. Question from Councillor Georgina Hill.
Thank you. I'm dying to say that heritage isn't just weighed up in architectural merit, but I'll get on to my question, just following on from what's just been said. Weighing, where I've been asked to weigh this all up and make a balanced judgment. So on that point, I'm trying to weigh up a few things. It's not the case that you couldn't build the railway because of the building. It's not the case you have to knock down the building to make the railway. That's not the point. It seems to be the cost of underpinning the building to construct the new platform. So it's a little bit of a cost-cutting measure. And obviously, if it's significant amounts of public money, then that maybe would weigh you one way. So approximately, how much is the cost to underpin the building?
Well, the sort of report puts that estimate at 375,000 to 575,000 pounds. I mean, it would be 375,000 is the cost of underpinning, but underpinning, given the works that have to be done to demolish the old platform. I mean, we're talking about very, very, you know, you can imagine very, very heavy engineering works of demolition. What the report points out is that there is a contingency that it could cost an additional £100,000 to £200,000 of structural repairs if that underpinning doesn't prove to be 100% successful. So we're talking about a minimum of 375,000 for underpinning, up to a potential 575,000.
Question now from Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. So with regard to the building that's going to be remaining, I see that the 99-year lease, what terms are revolving around that? Because is there a chance that in 6 months' time we could see that coming back to be demolished? Is there any guarantees on that? Also, if that does proceed, if there Betsy happens to be an incident during building, when something happens to that building, will there be any guarantees that it be restored? And I'm just wondering if there is any protections, and also what's the time scales for that lease to go forward? Because is it, yeah, if I raise the money in 6 months' time, are we going to come back? I just have concerns that we don't find ourselves in 6 to 12 months' time having the same conversation again about the other building. Thank you.
Well, I think you're sort of, you've got two levels. You've got no absolute guarantees, but you've got two levels of consideration. One is that we're talking about a public asset. You know, so it's Northumberland County Council that is in charge of this project. It's Northumberland County Council that is providing the new Northumberland line. It's Northumberland County Council that is going to be very, very heavily involved in the future of this whole scheme. I mean, there is absolutely no proposal before you or in the offing to remove the other building. The sort of other building stands back from the platform, so it doesn't have the sort of problems that the south building has. Having said that, there is no funding in place, as far as I'm aware, apart from the 40,000 that the parish council has referred to, for repairing and bringing these buildings back into beneficial use. You know, that would be a matter. It isn't part of this scheme that sort of these buildings. I mean, it wasn't part of the approval that you granted that these buildings would be used as part of the Northumberland Line scheme. It was proposed that they would be retained, but there was no proposal, in order to sort of, to require them to sort of be refurbished or anything like that. It was something that was debated at the time that you granted planning permission, and it was considered, that it wasn't something that we could condition. Northumberland County Council is the applicant, therefore you don't have one of six. You sort of can't have a 1 of 6 agreement between between the planning authority and the applicant, if the applicant is the county council. You know, so as I say, there is no 100% guarantee, but all the discussions that have taken place so far are aimed at enabling that building to be brought back into beneficial use. And part of the reasoning for demolition, well, it's not part of the reasoning, but one of the considerations that is a relevant planning consideration for you to take into account, as mentioned by the sort of Wales We Trust that I mentioned, is that spreading any available funding between the two buildings could make it less likely for both buildings to be brought back into benefit, you know, because we're sort of talking about very, you know, as I said earlier, very, very substantial sums of money. So certainly in the views of that organisation, they consider it would be better to retain one building. I take Councillor Ball's point. I mean, Councillor's point that it isn't just architectural merit, but I mean its whole appearance, its whole townscape value, its size makes it a more realistic proposition for having a beneficial after use. That's the sort of northern building. But you aren't going to get 100% guarantees. But again, if there was a proposal to get rid of that northern building, it would come before you again, and sort of you would, you know, have the opportunity then to sort of refuse any consent that was being sought. I'm sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded response to what was quite a straightforward question.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Dodd.
Yeah, I've been on planning a long time, and I've never heard of the Victorian Society pipe up. We hear lots of people, you know, make representations that have an interest, but I've never heard of the Victorian Society. Are they based?
It's a national. Sorry. It's a national organisation.
Right. So it's
I mean, you know, they aren't a consultee of the council, but clearly, you know, they have been made aware of the proposal. You know, the fact that, you know, that the representation came in at 5:35 yesterday evening. You know, they were obviously told that it was coming to the planning committee today, and you know, they are within their rights to sort of make representations. And as I said earlier, that their representations are very similar to sort of those that that have been made, you know, by the parish councils. That it should be retained because it does have historic and architectural merit.
Question from Councillor Jeff Reid.
Yeah, just to carry on from what Richard was saying about the Victorian Society. The building's Edwardian, so why would they be having to comment on it would be one question. And the other question is, it seems to me that having read this and I've listened to very carefully what's being said, this is just really about saving money. I mean, you know, you've looked at it and thought, I could rebuild that for 100,000 quid. So, you know, leaving it like that is going to cost us $500,000. So let's just get shot. There's no, you know, there is no protection. So I'm just wondering, you know, the whole scheme is now over £200 million. Another $500,000, another million's going to be nothing. But I realise we're on the drive to save money by having smaller car parks and less agricultural, architectural finesse. They're all just kind of, you know. Anyway, so the two questions, is this actually just about saving money? And why are the Victorian Society bothered about an Edwardian building?
If I deal with the second one first, the age of this building isn't 100% clear-cut. The Victorian Society date it between 1895 and 1905, which could take it into the Victorian period. The council's conservation officer and the applicant's heritage statement take it a bit later, either the first or the second decade of the 20th century. But it isn't conclusive. That there are some records which show that it was definitely there in about 1920, but when it was actually, which year it was actually built in is unclear. So the Victorian Society have clearly saying that it was, in their view, it was built right at the end of the Victorian period. I mean, there are cost pressures. I mean, in how much of this is a planning consideration? Well, it is a planning consideration to a certain extent. There are obviously cost pressures on this project. It was conceived before COVID. It's been constructed after COVID, when we all know that the construction costs of materials, costs of energy, labour costs have all increased. So there is continual challenge from central government on the cost of this project. Not something I get involved in at all, but I mean, I am party to sort of discussions around that. And as part of these funding challenges, there's two things that need to be done. The project team have to demonstrate to a team at the Department of Transport that sort of what is being done needs to be done in order to serve this railway. So there are certain aspects that have probably fallen foul along the line that sort of would have been nice things to do, but the sort of funding isn't there to do it. And then there are other challenges that have made them, sort of, as you've said, rethink this sort of car parking proposals. So as part of this project funding, the DOT is going to be funding phase 1 of the car parking at several stations, and it's going to be up to other parties to sort of fund phase 2, and the sort of county council presumably would be doing that. One of the my understanding is that Stuart Norton and his team have had discussions with central government about funding things like bringing these buildings at Bedlington Station into beneficial use, but it isn't something that central government would consider is essential to the running of the railway line. So there's, so there is no funding as part of the scheme for doing that. And as part of the cost challenge, is it a good use of public money to sort of be underpinning this building at substantial expense when there is no guarantee that it is going to have a beneficial after use if the grants can't be found to sort of secure that. So, I mean, my judgment, it's one that I've thought long and hard about. I mean, I take the conservation officer's point, about the sort of group value, but that does go back to the policy context is that because it is a non-designated heritage asset, that there sort of isn't a presumption in favour of retention or a presumption in favour of demolition. It's got to be a balanced judgment. So you need to consider all these sort of other factors. And my planning, wearing my planning hat, my balanced judgment was that the case was made that that the building, whilst it does have value, it doesn't have as much value as the other buildings because it's 70 years younger than the other buildings. A lot of the character of Bedlington Station has been lost. There was a glazed canopy at one stage that sort of linked these two buildings. That's no longer there. So they are separate, discrete buildings. The sort of fact that this building, is end on rather than adjacent to the platform and the road, in my planning view, means that its overall appearance and contribution to to sort of that whole southern part of the station is a lot less than the northern building. So, you know, my balanced judgment was that the applicants had made the case for demolition, not just on cost grounds, but in terms of being able to provide a sort of more attractive area, and then you know, and hopefully securing the continuation of the north building and the signal boxes, which date from 70 years previously. So it isn't an easy one, but that was, you know, that was the sort of thinking that sort of I went through as a professional planner.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Martin Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. What I would like to just explore, we have obviously in the conditions, we have a condition 3, I think it is to look at the building and document the building and save it in posterity in that way. And then in condition 4, we have a condition about the materials and recovering and reuse what might be salvageable. Now, sometimes buildings like this are actually moved. So I'm wondering, just trying to explore what might be in the art of the possible in terms of requiring this building to be taken down in such a way that it could be rebuilt somewhere else. Now, whether it was rebuilt on the station site, obviously it's not going to be rebuilt within the red line boundary, but looking at, I don't know exactly the topography, but looking at Google Earth, there might be possibility to move it to the north of the north building, or it could be reconstructed somewhere else if it was in a fit state to be reconstructed. So I'm asking what is in the art of the possible in terms of a condition to take that building down in a way that it could be then reconstructed. Is that a possibility?
I don't think that would meet the tests of conditions. I mean, it doesn't form part of the proposals. We've actually gone way beyond what the applicant thinks is reasonable in terms of the conditions that we're putting on. I mean, condition 3 doesn't just require the recording of the building to be demolished. It actually requires the recording of the building to be demolished and all the other historic features, including the platform, which is, you know, which is beyond what sort of might have been considered to be reasonable, but because of the group value, it was felt that it was important to sort of do that. So condition 3 is quite a strict condition. Condition 4, requiring the exterior fabric of the, I mean, the sort of interior. I mean, you sort of saw the photographs inside. There's a lot of damage to the floor, damage to the interior fabric of the buildings. But what condition 4 requires the applicant to do is to recover basically the sort of roof, the sort of exterior material, you know, so that the sort of building, the sort of bricks and the slates, and sort of reuse these. I think, I mean, its value, its heritage value as part of the group, I think falls from it being constructed in its current location. I think to sort of move it wouldn't necessarily appease the people who sort of want it to be retained. And I'm not aware, I haven't been given any figures, but you know, I would imagine it would be a very expensive process to actually do that. But I mean, I don't have the figures. It isn't a very, well, it isn't a very easy building to see what it would be used for. You know, it's a relatively small building. It's got 3 internal bits to it. So, I mean, it's not like the sort of other building that you can actually, the other building just lends itself more to the sorts of uses that you might expect to see on a platform. You know, so I mean, it's, even if you did move it further north, it's, well, you would still have to find that, you know, the sort of funding for that. I don't think it would meet the tests of being reasonable to sort of require the applicant to do that. You know, I don't think it would satisfy. I don't think it would satisfy either party. You know, either those that sort of want to retain it or those that sort of want to demolish it. I think you've got two options. You know, you either agree with the balanced judgment that it should be demolished, or you disagree and you think it should be retained.
Thank you. Any more
conditions are you know, they are strict conditions which have been. I mean, I've had to negotiate hard, even although I'm negotiating with the council. I've had to negotiate hard in order to get them to agree. You know, they sort of wanted just fulfilling these conditions has a cost, but in my view, it's a cost that is justifiable in planning terms and meets the test. So, you know, I mean, I've gone through each of these conditions with the applicants, demonstrating why I think that they meet the, you know, the sort of tests of reasonableness, of being relevant to planning, etc., etc.
Thank you, Gordon. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, any more questions this afternoon? Could I have a proposal, please? Councillor Ian Hutchinson.
To stimulate debate, I'll propose the officer recommendation of approval.
Is that seconded? Councillor Flux, are you seconding that?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Who would like to speak to the motion this afternoon? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Chair, I don't think there's enough time to go over the hours that I've spent on this, along with ex-colleagues from the Parish Council. And I think it'd be right to put on record our grateful thanks to Mark Ellis, who's a Senior Programme Officer who sat with us in taking us through the many options. For example, Councillor Flux asked about the grass. There was 2 slides put up. One was hardcore inside, so there'd be no grass to cut at all. If you go where you have the grass inside, it'll be a low-growing grass that only requires cut twice a year. It's a special grass. Right. When Gordon mentions £40,000, the Railway Heritage Trust have advised the parish 5% is required to access the funding. That's why it's £40,000, which would take you up to £1 million. Which, to be honest, with the contingencies, everything going up in cost, would probably cost £1 million for 2 buildings. What hasn't been discussed, Chair, and I think it should be put on the table here, Bedlington Station, like many places, suffers from antisocial behaviour. And the antisocial behaviour is at the front of that railway station, where the Parish Council have asked for the planters to be removed. With the planters removed, that opens up the opportunity for extra landscaping, which I'll contradict my colleague's comment when he said it wouldn't have character. I would say it would be the only railway station on that whole line that has any character.
Yes.
Asherton's got none. Blythe's 2 have got none. Delaval's got none. This would give you character and help regenerate Bedlington Station. And Mark Ellis has assured us that that's the way forward. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, for example, on the north building, there's a lean-to. It's the old toilet. It's in a despicable, deplorable state. It needs to be removed. And by removing that, and I remember standing next to Richard Dodd when we did the site visit, and there were some very sensible questions asked, Chair, which I'm sure you recall.
Yes.
When the buses pull in and people get off, when those lean-to toilets is removed, people will walk straight into the railway station. You've widened the access for everyone. And in addition, what you can't see there is the almost £8 million we've got in new footpaths and new cycle routes, which includes a 2-metre extension where the level crossing is for cycling and pedestrians. But not if the south building remains, because there will not be the room to do that. I'm looking at losing a lot of friends, but gaining a tremendous new look to Bedlington Station, which is the first time probably since the railway was built, Chairman. We have a wonderful opportunity to make a fantastic attraction. When people come on that railway line, they will know they're at Bedlington Station because they will see an attractive heritage and initiation centre, which we must congratulate the parish for wanting to do. And supported by West Bedlington, so I hope Adam Hogg takes my grateful thanks up to West Bedlington Town Council as well, Chair. I could say so much more, but I think what we really have to look at is money. Network Rail don't want our building. If it remains, it'll fall down. We have a responsibility for safety for all these pedestrians and these cyclists. And don't forget, if anybody's been there in the mornings and seen the kids that access the schools in that vicinity, safety is paramount, absolutely paramount. And we have that opportunity to take advantage of that. The Railway Heritage Trust have said, don't spend your money on the south building. These are the people who, not a mile away from here, helped restore that wonderful Morpeth railway station. I think we know that they're professionals. They've said they will give practical advice and a grant. They will give the grant. But what they're saying is, not for the south building, for the north building. And there's sufficient, I know they're innovative at East Bedlington Parish Council. They've got good clerks. They can work together. I do know, without naming people, one or two of them on the councils there who really are 100% behind the heritage of the railway within Bedlington. And they will deliver that. I know they will deliver it. But I know I'm going to lose a friendship, Chair, for the benefit of improving Bedlington Station. I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Councillor Dodd.
I do recall the site visit. I can't remember how long ago it would be, about a couple of years. The first thing I thought was that building has to go. If it is a much-loved building, why it is in such disrepair? I have the feeling that if we've got to save one, then the one that looks like it's a building to the railway is the one that we should put all the firepower and say this would make it look when you pull into a station. And I do take an interest in trains. I love watching Michael Portillo and all those train journeys all over the world. And sometimes it's not about the past, it's always about the future and how things look when you arrive or depart. So I think we have to make a decision here. We have to move forward. I like the slide that had this building taken away because it had no heritage in my view. That there are uses, and I'm sure Beamish, if it was that good, they would be in and say, we'll have it. But I don't think it's the case. I mean, I used to be on Tynedale District Council. A lot of us used to be on a district council. And when that was there, Hexham, they said, do you know how much we spent? $250,000 just looking after old stones. Now, that's what it was. That was the cost of looking after these old buildings that cost a lot of money. Now, we've gone through the, devolution down to the single unitary council. And a lot of those buildings have now gone from Tynedale because someone else is coughing up to look after them. And I think that building, that south building, looks like a money pit to me. And I think the estimates, we would be very unwise to spend that kind of money. I'd rather save the one, you know, if we've got to save one or buy one or whatever you want to call it. If we want to save, that's the one we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you, Chair. I was told as well that we always take the principle of the plan that we have in front of us, and it's the demolition of the south building. Now, I've heard that's going to cost upwards of £500,000 just to make that building safe for the wider aspect of Bellington Station. Now, there's no prospect of anyone actually taking on that building. So we're going to spend an enormous amount of money on a building that no one may even take on and may be left to become another derelict building in the future. What I saw on the screen with that south building gone was that area be opened up, and you can see the north building, which could be repaired, restored to its former glory, and it could be such an attraction for Bellington Station, as was heard by colleague there, Councillor Wallace. So I think in doing this is such a grand thing for Bellington to remove that. The accessibility issues, I've worked with a lot of accessibility consultants on various projects that I work on. Well, if that south building remained there, you have a back and forth ramp sort of thing. That is not very good for people in a wheelchair. What is the best way for people in a wheelchair, anyone with accessibility issues, is to all use the same pathway to the station. And removing that south station allows for that egress, that ramp up to the station, that would be much more beneficial for people accessing that station. I think opening up that area looks a lot better, and I think I'd be supporting this recommendation, the officer's recommendation as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Jeffreid.
Interestingly, if the building was built in between 1900 and 1910, and it shut in 1964, it's been emptier. It's been empty longer than it was actually used. It's been derelict for longer than it was whatever function it had before. And you know, if there'd been if the photographs had obviously been and seen it, if there was any kind of got me brain, architectural merit, you know, if there was stone, if there was carved window frames, or if there was something, but it's just four walls of brick. So you know, you want to try and conserve things, and you want to have things in the landscape that show heritage. And if there was some way, but what heritage has that building actually got? It's, you know, there's no prospect of it being brought back into use. It's been emptier. It's been empty far longer than it was used. And, you know, the people who own it have got such disrespect for it that they're storing bits of traffic cones and traffic lights and all the rest of it. So, you know, it's not as if it has been cherished by the people of Bedlington in the past. You know, I think the northern building will look really smart when it's finished. Yeah, and what might be better would be that, you know, there are plenty of fine buildings in Bedlington and Bedlington Station, and quite a few of them are distressed. So it might be better the parish council concentrating on some of those other buildings. The value is not there. It is not worth spending upwards of £500,000 on something that isn't actually worth anything. Never mind. So I came here with an open mind, with the thought, well, you know, we need to keep these things, but having listened to the discussion and having heard what my colleagues said, then, you know, I'm just going to have to vote for the officer recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Flux.
Thank you, Chair. Some of us like old buildings, and some people like the idea of living in an old building. But if you were to think, maybe I'd love a station cottage, and you went to your bank and said, there's this building at Bedlington, can we look and see if I can buy it? The bank would say on your bike pretty quick on the idea that you've got to spend £360,000 from Councillor Hill's very good question, as a bare minimum, before you look at anything else, like the quality of the roof, the quality of the bricks, the windows, any number of unforeseen issues with that. Saving money, sometimes people seem to treat that like it's a dirty word, saving money, but we should be looking to save money, and if that it isn't an insignificant sum of money that's been identified as a saving there. I thought that Councillor Wallace spoke incredibly well, and it's very much to his credit that he said something that's correct rather than something that might be popular. And I salute him for that, and it shows what a good councillor he is. I represent an area with a train station. If you go and have a look at it, you'll see there's little bricks around the place where there was a nice little building at Cramlington once and things like that. And I grew up in a town called, well, I went to school in a town called Wolverton, very famous in the labour movement, very famous in the trading movement. And you'll see that buildings there were demolished. Buildings, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of buildings like this have been removed from the Network Rail infrastructure over generations. Some of that's a shame, but some of it inevitably would have had to have happened. And I'm afraid inevitably that really has to happen here. I don't think that, there is any reasonable argument that keeping this is a good idea. And I will wholeheartedly be supporting the recommendation of the officers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
Well, it looks like I, for one, will not be supporting it. I think it goes beyond the heritage of the building. I think it's shameful that we're not looking at the alternative uses and that community asset that it could be for the community of Bedlington Station. I think it's shameful that a company that's making pre-tax profits of 324 million are saying that they can't afford it, and that's a purely financial decision. We're seeing millions of pounds, billions of pounds being spent on HS2. And I just don't understand why a company, again, closing ticket offices and putting profits again before communities, villages and facilities. And I think it's shameful that the opportunity hasn't been given to the local parish to look at alternative uses, to have them conversations, because just an acknowledgement, I think it's disgusting when it could be an asset to that local community and taken forward. By the looks of things, I'm the only person that thinks that, but I would not be able to walk out of here without saying something. I think it is a real shame for that community that the alternative uses and funding weren't looked at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hill?
Thank you. Well, there's me thinking I was the only one. And I have actually been umming and ahhing throughout this whole debate. But what it comes down to is this. I'm a big rail enthusiast, and why I've been very supportive of this whole project and been voted for it all along, even though there's been the odd tree that's likely to come down and residents disturbed by construction work. I've supported this because of the benefits of rail. And one of the benefits of rail is not just obviously as a mode of transport, a cleaner, much better form of transport, it's also a rail heritage which runs deep throughout this country, the historic. And Bedlington's got a significant rail heritage. And I was umming and ahhing thinking the balance between that and quite a lot of, as you explained, public money to underpin the building. But when we're talking about conservation and the benefits of maintaining this, we're not just talking about people here now, we're talking about 100 years' time. And I think in 100 years' time, if this was restored and used as representatives of the parish council like to do, I'm sure residents in 100 years' time will be very glad the building was saved, even if it was at cost at the time. So I'm voting against the recommendation.
Thank you. Chip in a little bit from the chairman. On this occasion, I am right behind Councillor Wallace. I think he's talking sense. I am a big heritage man. I love our railway bridges, our railway buildings at stations, some of the very best. But I must admit, the building at the south, you know, I feel architecturally it hasn't got a lot to recommend it. We'd be spending a lot of money for very little. Whereas the north building, I do think is a bit of a gem. And like Councillor Wallace, I think when we're travelling up and down that new railway line, we'll be hopefully able to admire a restored north building. It isn't a money-saving exercise. You know, we're looking at the architectural value, but yes, you know, we are looking at financial aspects too. And it would be wrong just to say, you know, we're saving this building at any cost. You've got to look at the merit and the value and the beauty that such a building might bring. And I feel that southern building has not got a lot to recommend it. But I hope Bedlington are successful in attracting the money they need to restore the building, because I think it would be very good for Bedlington, I do, and I will be supporting the motion this afternoon. I was wondering if the mover of the motion would like to round up or close the debate.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's a lot of words being spoken. I don't intend to say many now because it's all been said. I think Alex said it at the very start, basically. My colleagues on the left who appear to be supporting it, I agree totally with. I do sympathise with the Parish Council and our members who are going to presumably vote against it. But financially, it just doesn't stack up. So I'm going to be, as I said before, I'll support this application.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, all those in favour of the recommendation to demolish this southern building, would you like to raise your hands?
10.
Those against?
2.
That proposal is passed. Thank you very much indeed. So we have an appeals update, pages 27 to 40, mainly for information to the members. And there's also an update report on Section 106 agreements, pages 41 to 44. As Chair, I have no urgent business this afternoon. I'd like to thank you all for your attendance